Hi, I'm Brett from papercartridges.com, and what could be more exciting than to talk about grooves in a rifle barrel that are deeper at one end than the other? So that's what we're going to do today, kind of a deep dive into the history of progressive depth rifling. That's why I'm wearing my tweed today as the professor of musketry. So buckle up. The next 20 to 30 minutes, who knows? I can talk for a long time, but I guarantee you it will be the most exciting edge of your seat content that you've seen on YouTube in a long time. So, what is progressive depth rifling? You might have read about it, heard someone mention that their gun has progressive depth rifling. And it's really quite simple. It just means that the grooves, the depth of the rifling grooves, is deeper at the breech than it is at the muzzle. So the grooves are going to be slightly deeper, only about 10 thousandths of an inch deeper at the muzzle, or deeper at the breech rather than at the muzzle. And that's only maybe 3 or 4 sheets of paper thickness. So we're not talking about a whole lot. And the grooves aren't super, super deep in the breech, just slightly deeper at the breech. And why do we even bother? Why did they even bother doing this in the mid 19th century? And the simple answer is that a rifle musket will shoot an expanding hollow-based bullet, like the Minié bullet or a Pritchett bullet. It will shoot them much more accurately out of rifle barrels that have the progressive depth, as opposed to the other more constant depth type of rifling. And they discovered this in the 1840s. So before progressive depth rifling, you had constant depth rifling. That's just the groove is the same depth from the muzzle to the breech. And they've got so they have the Minié bullet that's starting to appear. The Pritchett is coming soon. But in all of these tests, the United States, Europe, everyone is testing what is the best depth of groove that we want for our rifles. And everyone determined, by everyone I mean the United States, the Europeans, the shallowest you want your rifling is about 11 thousandths of an inch, and the deepest you want it to be is about 20 thousandths of an inch. So shallower than 11 thousandths, you get really poor accuracy, and deeper than 20 thousandths, the bullet just can't expand that much to fill the grooves, and you start getting gas blowing by. So, as one period authority put it, with grooves too shallow, the ball is no longer secure in its direction, and the slightest excess of charge will force it over the lands. And this is a phenomenon that's known as stripping, where the bullet just goes over the top of the grooves rather than filling the grooves. And we see these really deep grooves, constant depth grooves, so pre-progressive depth rifling. We see them in the rifles of the early 1850s. So think of the P51 and then like the P53 Enfield, the first model Enfield, which was made by contractors in Birmingham. And they didn't have the technological ability to make progressive depth rifling. So the first pattern of the P53 Enfield had constant depth rifling, and the grooves were 14 thousandths of an inch deep. I mean, deep. You can see them from the muzzle. Uh, they're noticeably deep. French rifles went to the fullest other extreme. They were 20 thousandths of an inch deep. The Lorenz rifle musket, the 1840 Lorenz, was actually 25 thousandths of an inch deep rifling. And it also had what was called a freed breech. The Dryset needle rifle, 30 thousandths of an inch. Uh, but firing an expanding bullet like the Minié, having the rifling grooves deeper at the breech and shallower at the muzzle just somehow gave better accuracy. And you have to remember that the military rifles are using a military charge, so a full power charge, somewhere between 60 and 80 grains of black powder. So that's a real heavy charge because you have to launch a bullet out to long distance. These are military rifles. And because military muzzle-loading military rifles are more accurate with progressive depth rifling, it was widely adopted. The United States, like the Model 55 and the Model 61 rifles, progressive depth rifling. The British Enfields, the later models, progressive depth rifling. All the French rifles of this era, same thing. So you might wonder, how was progressive depth rifling invented? Was there a brilliant physicist or a renowned gunsmith who came up with this more accurate method of rifling? And the actual answer is it was completely accidental and unintentional how it was discovered. A Frenchman named Francois Tamige, and if you're a real gun history nerd, you will know he's the guy who put grooves on bullets. He called them cannelures, and they're still used to this day on modern bullets. The little groove is called a cannelure because of Tamige. But in a rifle musket, the grooves on the bullet tend to make the bullet more accurate, and the U.S. Army even found them to be a nice, convenient place to put the bullet lube. So we often call them bullet lube grooves today, but you can thank Tamige for that. But the French had, by the 1840s, they had a primitive form of a rifle musket. It had constant depth rifling, so this is pre-progressive depth rifling. And they had various devices at the breech that was used to expand the bullet, like the Delville chamber, the Touvenon pillar breech system. And they realized that you can take an old smoothbore musket, some obsolete old smoothbore, and all you got to do is unscrew the breech plug. You got to drill and tap one of Touvenon's pillar breeches into it, and then you can cut rifling grooves into that smoothbore barrel, and voila, you now have instantly upgraded your smoothbore musket over to being a rifle. And the latest French smoothbore musket model at this time was the model 1842. It's a very modern percussion smoothbore musket. And it fired a 16 millimeter ball. And someone in France, for reasons that I don't know, decided that they wanted all the French muskets to fire a uniform caliber of a 17 millimeter ball. That meant that the model 1842 French smoothbore muskets all got reamed out to a bore size of 18 millimeters so they could accept the 17 millimeter bullet. This gets done right before the French discover how easy it is to convert their smoothbore muskets to being rifles. But with that 18 millimeter bore that has been drilled out, the barrel is super thin at the muzzle. There's not much metal left there. It works as a smoothbore, but if you were going to try to rifle these guns, and remember the French rifles are 20 thousandths of an inch deep, that's their groove size. You try to cut that out of the thin muzzle and you're going to burst right through. There's just simply not enough metal left. So they can only take out 4 or 5 thousandths of an inch of metal from the muzzle area of the gun. And the French, they know that there's no point just rifling a gun with 4 or 5 thousandths of an inch of rifling. They already know you need at least 11 thousandths of an inch deep rifling grooves to stabilize the bullet. So there's kind of no point in going back and rifling these model 1842 guns. We kind of really screwed the pooch here, reaming them out for 18 millimeter. But Francois Tamige had an idea. He came to the rescue with his proposal. Let's cut the rifling really deep at the breech, so we'll make it 20 thousandths, back here at the breech area, where there's plenty of metal, so we can cut those deep grooves, and we're in no danger of weakening the barrel. But as we move towards the muzzle, we taper the depth of the rifling down, so the grooves get shallower. And at the muzzle, where the barrel is thinnest, it's only 4 or 5 thousandths of an inch deep. So the French figure, what the heck, we might as well try this. And so they rifle one of these smoothbore guns with the real thin muzzle. They make it deep rifling at the breech and thin rifling at the muzzle. And they take it out and they go to shoot it. And everyone is shocked because this rifled smoothbore is more accurate than the regular purpose-made French rifles of the area. So it's like, what a good deal. We can have these crappy old smoothbores with the thin muzzles, we can rifle them, and they're going to shoot more accurately than the rest of our guns. So it's like, hooray. And that is how progressive depth rifling was discovered, completely accidentally. And immediately after they discovered this progressive depth rifling, everybody started asking,
How does it work? And are not, my liege.
So when we consult the various books of armaments from the 19th century, they never tend to answer the question of how progressive depth rifling works. They just simply say it does work. They say great advantages were derived by rifling out these guns with progressive depth grooves, and it was found to give increased accuracy. James Burton, who developed the Burton bullet as master armorer at Harper's Ferry for the U.S. Model 1855 and subsequent rifles, he said it progressive depth makes guns more accurate. I don't know why. He thought it was something about the bullets keeping the barrel cleaner. In the 1850s, Major Mordecai went over to Europe as part of a commission and brought back a lot of information. And the U.S. Ordnance Department starts looking into it. We obtained a copy of Monsieur Panot's work on rifles, where he explained all the French details about progressive depth rifling and Tamiget's grooves on the bullets. And we just stole it. The U.S. Ordnance Department just straight up stole the European ideas and copied them almost verbatim. And we included it in our Model 1855 rifle. We reached the same conclusions as the French. The progressive depth rifling barrel is simply more accurate. And that's why the US rifle Model 1855, the rifling is 15 or 16 thousandths of an inch deep at the breech and 5 thousandths of an inch deep at the muzzle. Uh, the Ordnance Department just determined that the superiority of the decreasing over the uniform depth for grooves is confirmed. The progressive rifling gave less deviation. It resulted in much tighter groups and higher velocity, so there's less bullet drop. The British were a little more of a mixed bag. Again, they had the constant depth rifling at first. Their contractors couldn't make progressive depth rifling. And the Enfield factory, Enfield Lock, started making Enfield rifle barrels in 1858 with progressive depth rifling. There were lots of British objections to making the barrels progressively rifled, mostly based on theory, like this won't work because we think this or that. But in time, they just could not argue with the results. The guns with the progressive depth rifling shoot faster.
Which I meant to say shoots better.
So we have established that progressive depth rifling grooves shoot more accurately than constant depth rifles, and we've gone over how it was discovered, that it was adopted by all the armies in the mid 19th century for the rifle muskets. But how does it actually work?
So, to help illustrate what's going on in a progressively rifled barrel, I've taken an original 19th century diagram and simplified it to show an exaggerated depth of rifling. So, this diagram was originally from Major Mordecai's report following the Crimean War. But we have our Enfield rifle barrel with 4 thousandths inch deep grooves at the muzzle, where we load our Minier Burton bullet and then we ram it down. Notice how the depth is greater at the breech. Of course, this is not to scale, but it is just to help visually represent the system. So back to the shop.
So now it's time for Brett's quasi scientific theory. And we know that bullets are expanded significantly before they really begin to move that far down the barrel of a rifle musket. So a pure soft lead bullet is going to upset or bump up. This effect is much more enhanced with bullets that have a plug or an iron cup in the base. But even the simple Burton style bullet with no plug or cup is going to expand before it moves very far at all. We know this from experiments in an excellent book by Dr. Mann. This is The Bullet's Flight. So he took a lead bullet in a barrel and fired it. Each time he fired it, he would chop an inch or so off of the barrel. And he got down to just a short stub of a barrel and fired it. And the bullets that he recovered were still fully expanded into the rifling. So we know that this happens almost instantaneously. And we also know that the bullet starts to expand. It may not be fully expanded, but it starts to expand before it even starts to move forward. This is really weird physics, but it is true. When the massive energy of that powder charge gets applied to the hollow base of a bullet, the bullet starts to expand outwards towards the rifling grooves before it overcomes its own inertia and starts moving forward down the barrel. So if we have a heavy military charge, like 60 grain military charge, that is a massive amount of energy, and it is suddenly applied to a bullet at rest in the chamber of the rifle. So it is initially forced to expand slightly, but once the inertia of the bullet gets overcome and it starts moving down the barrel, the pressure is still increasing as the rest of the powder continues to burn, and the bullet continues to expand after it begins to move. So it's expanding back here as it starts to move, and the lead is being pushed out into the deeper grooves at the breech. And that means more lead is pushing out into the grooves. Basically, as much lead as can be pushed into the grooves. It might not be fully expanded. So with a 15 thousandths deep grooves at the breech here, the bullet may not be fully swaged, so to speak, into those 15 thousandths, but it might fill up 10 thousandths, 12 thousandths, and it means it has a grip. The lead is pushed a considerable distance, 10, 12, maybe even 15 thousandths. Maybe it fills it up at the breech. I don't know. But it has something to hang onto. So as the bullet continues to expand, as it moves up, as the pressure builds in the chamber, it's already got a tight grip on the rifling. So it's starting to follow the rifling grooves down the barrel. And it also is forming a very tight seal as the depth of the groove starts to get shallower as it moves towards the muzzle. And that starts to squeeze the bullet down. So it's expanded back here, and now as it goes forward, it is being squeezed down, absolutely, completely pressure swaged tight seal in the bore. It is capturing every bit of the rest of the propellant power of the gunpowder in the breech. And just as importantly, with the muzzle loading rifle, once it is fully expanded and it's swaged out into the barrel, completely like pressure tight seal, it's scraping the fouling that's left in the barrel from the shot prior. That's getting scraped in front of it. It's not moving past the bullet and being left in the barrel. So it has a self-cleaning aspect, and that's why Burton believed that progressive depth rifling kept the barrels cleaner, and that was why they were more accurate. Uh, so with a Italian reproduction rifle barrel, though, so we're leaving progressive depth rifling and we're going to what you can buy today, like a Pedersoli rifle musket. They only have rifling that is 3 to 4 thousandths of an inch deep. Uh, and remember, historically in the 19th century, it was determined that 11 thousandths is the absolute shallowest you can go. You want it more than that, ideally. And no one had an 11 thousandth inch groove military rifle musket. It was 14 thousandths, 20 thousandths, 25 thousandths. But Pedersoli is churning out rifle muskets right now with 4 thousandths of an inch deep grooves. And Brett's unscientific theory for those, if you load a Minié bullet or a Pritchett, a full power military load, and you fire it in one of those Italian constant depth barrels, so the bullet does expand before it starts to move. Everything is still happening the same way it did in the progressive depth barrel, but those grooves are really shallow, so there's not much of a space for the lead to really expand into and grip. But you still have that massive amount of energy, enough energy that we know that could expand a bullet into 15 thousandths of an inch deep grooves. That's still there, but there's only 4 thousandths to grab onto. So that massive amount of energy is applied to the base of the bullet, but it doesn't have as firm of a grip in the rifling as it starts to move forward. So the bullet might want to try to follow the rifling at first, but the acceleration and energy of that massive charge behind it is simply too much. So it is being forced straight out the barrel, and it's going to strip over the top of the grooves. This means it leaves the barrel with very little spin or no spin at all. It might just strip straight over the top. And that's going to result in keyholes uh, or really poor accuracy at best. So to shoot these modern Italian reproduction rifle muskets, most people find that you can't use the full military charge. You got to kind of monkey with your load. You got to figure out what your rifle is actually going to shoot. And so a lot of modern, improved, like the Lee Target Mini and other things, have been developed to try to squeak some accuracy out of these just ridiculously shallow modern reproduction rifle grooves. And they knew back in the 1840s and 1850s that shallow grooves don't work. They used deeper grooves, nothing less than 11 thousandths of an inch, which is more than twice the depth of grooves in an Italian reproduction, which is it's even advertised constant depth rifling at 4 thousandths of an inch. But back in the 19th century, when these were the weapons that would defend their empires, defend their countries, defend the United States, they determined that you need deep rifling somewhere in the gun, either deep rifling from front to back all the way down, 11 thousandths at a minimum, or the progressive depth rifling, which shoots even more accurately for whatever whatever reason that it actually does work. It does work. Progressive depth rifling is more accurate, and they adopted all of this in the 19th century. So that's why they bothered historically. It wasn't a gimmick. It wasn't a fad. It actually did stinking work, and they went through the greater expense of making the grooves deeper at the breech and shallower at the muzzle for that reason. So for the survivors who have lasted this long in this video, I am sorry that the knowledge that you may have gained is not going to translate into any marketable job skills in the 21st century. But I hope this was at least useful to you. Maybe it helped you fall asleep. I don't know. But I'm Brett. I'm the captain of ordnance, and today I am the professor of musketry. Please like and subscribe if this was at all interesting to you, and I will see you next time.